everyone, Josh here, Wargaming Noob Historical, back with another read-through review. This time around we are continuing the Black Powder series of campaign books, this time with The Last Argument of Kings. Now this book is centered around 18th century combat, and just like all the other read-through reviews that I've done on the channel, we're just going to do a quick overview of what you can find in this campaign book, and after that you can decide whether or not this is a campaign book that you want to get for your collection. So just scrolling through. Some wonderful painted models from the Warlord studio, again depicting a number of different 18th century conflicts here. So this book was written by Pete Brown, again based on the Black Powder rules. This introduction just basically goes through the 18th century and all the conflicts that were involved in that century, including the War for Spanish Succession, 7 Years' War, a lot of the Frederick the Great stuff. So that's what most of this book covers. So in the contents, you're going to get an overview of the warfare in the Age of Reason and Dress to Kill, which again talks about the uniforms that were prevalent during this particular time. Then you're going to get the special rules for this period, and then we move on to the meat and potatoes, the conflicts, the major conflicts that this book is going to cover. First off, you got the War of Spanish Succession, then the Great Northern War, followed by the Storm on the Danube, the War of Austrian Succession, the Wars of the English Succession, 7 Years' War, and then War in the Colonies, and then you have a bunch of raids and invasion scenarios that you can play in this particular period of time. Then we're going to round out the book with an overview of the 18th century war game, the bibliography, and additional reading and credits. Alright, so moving on, you're just going to get a brief overview of the warfare in the Age of Reason. This is going to be slightly different from the other stuff that we've covered, which is usually centered around the Napoleonic Wars or the 19th century conflicts like the American Civil War. And again, just some basic information here. We'll flip through this real quick, get some more wonderful studio art or studio painted models. And then you have the section Dress to Kill, which talks about the uniforms of the 18th century. And again, here are great examples from the Warlord studio of the uniforms that you could see in this particular period of time. Here we have Hanoverian infantry, and then Prussians, and then the French right here. Here we have the Musketeer Noir. Let's see if we can zoom in a little bit here. Now, special rules for this particular period talk about formations, interpenetration, moving and firing, platoon firing, and grenades. This is that particular period of time where grenadiers were more prevalent and actually doing things that involved the name grenadiers, so throwing grenades and all that stuff. As we move into the 19th century, that is no longer the purpose of the grenadiers. Pikes, butts, and bayonets. Capture the colors, just some interesting information. You get dragoons, cavalry, charging infantry, elephants, gun batteries and battalion guns, and then army lists. And then we move on to the first major conflict of the 18th century, the War of Spanish Succession. This is a 14-year war that involved pretty much all the major powers of Europe. Brief overview of John Churchill, an ancestor of Winston Churchill, the Duke of Marlborough. He's got some special rules, strategic genius, and then talks about the British Army of the 18th century. Here's some more wonderful studio painted miniatures and some terrain. So here are stats and special rules for British Army for 1700 to 1755. You have guards, infantry, Highland infantry, yeomen, light infantry, horse, dragoons, and British light artillery. So the Duke of Marlborough has a staff rating of 9, which is fairly high for this period of time. And we're going to see as we move forward the strategic ratings of all the other famous generals. Also, kind of like your build on your army, the British Army here. So British Guards, you get 0 to 3 per army. 40 to 50% of your army must contain infantry. You can have 0 to 2 units or regiments of Highland infantry. No limit to the British yeomen. 10%, 0 to 10% of the light infantry. And then cavalry, British horse, 0 to 20%. British dragoons, 0 to 20%. And then artillery, 1 per 3 infantry units. So you have an artillery battalion per 3 infantry units for your army. Stats and special rules for allies of the British, right there. Wonderful painted models again. So they talk about the Battle of Blenheim, very important battle in this period of time. And just some more information. Here's your orders of battle for the French and the Allies. Objectives. And then, obviously, after action report of how it played for the Warlord staff that played this scenario out. Some more wonderfully painted models from the studio. Then we move on to the Great Northern War, 1700 to 1721. Again, this involved the Swedish, Russia, Denmark, and all the countries in that conflict. You have Charles XII of Sweden. His special rules are inspirational bravery, courageous fighter, excellent commander, staff rating of 9, just like the Duke of Marlborough. And it talks about the Swedish army of the 18th century. And then here are the stats. King Charles XII has a staff rating of 9, as stated earlier. So the Swedish Guard, you have the 0 to 10% per army. Infantry is 30 to 50% of the army. Garrison regiment, no limit. For cavalry, 0 to 10% of the army. The dragoons are 0 to 40%. And then again, artillery is 1 per 3 infantry units. There's some information on the Russian army of the 18th century. Yeah, Peter the Great here, he has a staff rating of 9. So it seems to be that all the famous generals and rulers that are involved in these particular conflicts in the 18th century will have staff rating of 9. The stats for the Russian army for this particular conflict. Again, 0 to 10% per army for the Russian Guards, 40 to 50% Russian infantry, no limit to the garrison regiment, 0 to 1 units per army of the Russian Jaegers, cavalry is 0 to 10%, cuirassiers 0 to 10%, dragoons 0 to 40%, and then again, the Russian light artillery is 1 per 3 infantry units. You have the Battle of Holguin. I can't, it's hard to read the font here. But again, this is a conflict between the Swedish and the Russians. This is the scenario setup, dawn raid, your terrain, then an after action report of how it played for the Warlord staff. Your orders of battle. Now we move on to Storm on the Danube. This is the Habsburgs versus the Ottoman Empire. Talks about the Ottoman army of the 18th century. Special rules for the Ottomans. The flag of the Prophet, mob rule. There can be only one. And your stats for the Ottomans. So Sultan or Pasha have a staff rating of 8. And then your Janissaries are 0 to 25% of your army. Your regular infantry is 0 to 25%. Your regular is no limit. Skirmishers 0 to 20%. For your cavalry, you have the Swavarillari, 0 to 1 per army. The Sipahis, 0 to 30%. The regular cavalry is 0 to 30%. Elephants, 0 to 1 per army. So you have 1 elephant per army. Your Ottoman artillery is 1 per 2 infantry regiments. The Ottomans were known for their artillery and how devastating it was during this period of time. Actually, even before then, leading up to this period of time. So the Austrian army of the 18th century, you got some background information here. And then the Francois Eugene, Prince of Savoy, is the special general for the Habsburgs. He has special rules of inspirational, reckless, and excellent commander, so he gets a staff rating of 9. Here are your stats for the Austrians. Austrian Grenadiers are 0 to 20% of the force. Regular infantry 0 to 50%. Austrian light infantry 0 to 30%. Cavalry cuirassiers is 0 to 10%. Austrian Dragoons 0 to 20%, and Hussars 0 to 20%. And then it's 1 gun per 2 infantry regiments for the Austrians. Here you have the Battle of Petrovarden. You have your deployment objectives, the terrain, and then again how it played with the Warlord staff. Here are your orders of battle. And then we move on to the War of Austrian Succession, 1740 to 1748. So the special character is Maurice de Saxe, Marshal of France. Special rules, redoubtable foe, and dropsy, and excellent commander, so he has a staff rating of 9. Talk about the French army of the 18th century, and some more wonderfully painted studio models. Le Garde Française. Okay, here are the stats for the French from this period of time. French Guard 0 to 6 per army, so that's 0 to 6 regiments per army. French infantry is 30 to 50%. Foreign infantry 0 to 20%. French militia no limit. Your light infantry is 0 to 10%. And then for cavalry, the gendarmerie is 0 to 20%. Line cavalry 0 to 40%. Dragoons 0 to 40%. Hussars 0 to 20%. And then French artillery, you have 1 per 3 battalions. And French horse artillery, you got 1 per army. The major battle for this particular section, of the book is the Battle of Fontenoy. Again, there's some information on how to set this battle up for yourself. Again, how it played. Then we move on to the Wars of English Succession. That's 1690 to 1746. So you have Charles Edward Stuart, Bonnie Prince Charlie. Where are his rules? Doesn't really show any staff rating for Charles Stuart here. And here are the stats. Oh, so Charles Stuart has a staff rating of 7, so he's not that competent. I mean, 7's not a bad number. It's more average for general in Black Powder. But again, compared to the other major characters that are being showcased in the book, it's pretty low. Even an average commander, just a no-name commander, is better than Charles Stuart. Alright, so stats, and then for infantry, you have your Highland clan, 30 to 50% of the army, then another, you have another Highland clan, 30 to 50% per army. So what I do notice here is the optional upgrades for the first clan would be stubborn and tough fighters, but the second would only be stubborn. Lowland infantry, 30 to 50%. French PK, 0 to 2 per army. Highland skirmishers, 0 to 10%. Cavalry, you have your Jacobite horse, 0 to 20% per army. And then artillery is 1 per 5 infantry units. Wonderful painted studio models here. So, it looks like this is a campaign, right here. So you have your campaign rules, information on the Jacobite army. Here we go. Boots for the Prince, a campaign of the 1745 rebellion. Hanoverian army, victory and defeat, the Jacobite victory table. So this is going to be slightly different than the other major battles depicted in this book, because it is a campaign. You have a recovery table here and Jacobite victory table that you'll need to roll 1d6 on to see what the results are for both of those. Part 1, Edinburgh and Prestonpans. Again, you have to roll for your Highland army table here. General Cope's army for the Hanoverians. This is the build out here. So, I guess you also choose by rolling. You get to choose a couple choices here. Await the reinforcements, march in Edinburgh, retreat into England. And then the Jacobite player will be rolling on the Highland army table here. Then you have information for the person who will be reffing the campaign. So this is going to be a lot different from anything that I've covered before in the Black Powder campaign books. So part 2, the Siege of Edinburgh and Stirling Castles. You have information for the Hanoverian player, for the referee. And then part 3, the Invasion of England. You got your background, information for the Hanoverian player, Jacobite player, and the ref. Marshal Waite's army. You have infantry, cavalry, artillery, special rules. And then part 4, decision at Derby. Again, information for the Jacobite player, the Empire, and then some information here. Duke of Cumberland's army and its build-out, its makeup. Part 5 is the invasion of Scotland. You have a Royal Navy table at this point. Also information for the Jacobite and Hanoverian players. And then for the ref, so this will cover Battle of Falkirk, the Battle of Spey. And yeah, part 6, the road to Iverness and Culloden Moor. And then building on this campaign, just information on that, how it played with the Warlord studio, with the Warlord staff. And some wonderfully painted models. Then we move on to a humongous conflict, probably the first great international conflict or world war that the world had ever seen, 7 Years' War. This is going to involve a number of different nations. Here we have Frederick the Great of Prussia, special rule, discipline, and obedience. Some information on the oblique order, information on the Prussian army of the 18th century, and then the stats for the Prussian army, 1740 to 1772. So Frederick the Great has a staff rating of 9. Infantry, you have your Prussian guards at 0 to 20%. Infantry is 30 to 50%. Prussian garrison infantry, no limit. Prussian militia, no limit. Prussian Jaegers, 0 to 1 per army. Your cavalry, cuirassiers, 0 to 10%. Dragoons, 0 to 30%. Hussars, 0 to 10%. And then artillery is 1 per 3 infantry units. And we go through. Then you have the major battle for this section of the book, the Battle of Hundorf. Give you background, deployments, objectives, and then how it played. And then your order of battle. And then we move on to the War in the Colonies. So it covers the French-Indian Wars, that's information. So here are the stats and special rules for colonial European armies in America. So you have your stats, British and French colonial armies. Basically, they're using the same stats that are provided on pages 24 and 57. Armies fighting in the colonies, unsurprisingly, include a high proportion of colonial troops. So this is going to be a little different than the armies that are listed on page 24 and 57, because you're going to have more colonials in these armies. And that's what these stats are for, basically the colonial infantry and militia. Colonial infantry is 0 to 30% of your army. Colonial militia is 10 to 50%. Colonial light infantry is 0 to 30%. And then you have rules for Native American armies. Here are their stats. You'll have a war chief with a staff rating of 7. Native American skirmishers, 40 to 60% of the army. And then the war band is 40 to 60% of the army. You have some information on Chief Pontiac of the Ottawa, including his special rules. He's the only Indian leader who can act as an army commander-in-chief. He has a staff rating of 7. So there's a model of Chief Pontiac himself. Then some fluff here. Then you got the war in India. So it's interesting that it does cover India here. So you have your rules for colonial European armies in India, 1700 to 1775. You have European infantry, sepoys, a native Indian infantry, horse, native Indian horse, and colonial European artillery. So it says to use the Indian army list on the following page to represent Allied commanders and their armies. So for this, you have 0 to 25% European infantry, colonial European infantry, 40 to 60% sepoys. Native Indian infantry is 0 to 40%, and cavalry, you have European horse 0 to 10%, Native Indian horse 0 to 40%, and then artillery is 1 per 3 battalions. Here are the stats for the Indians. Command rating of 7 or 8. So Native Indian infantry is 50 to 100%. Native Indian skirmishers, 0 to 10. Indian horse, 0 to 40. Indian elephants, 0 to 1 per army. Artillery is 1 per 2 infantry units. And then you have the special rule of treacherous. So we have the Battle of Achaia. Just how it set up and how it played. Orders of battle. So French French commanders, French infantry, Native American allies. Then you have the Chickasaw commanders, Chickasaw warriors. Okay, so we've covered all the major scenarios. The only thing that was different is that the War of English Succession is a campaign within this book rather than a battle scenario like all the other conflicts. Then we move on to raids and invasions. You're going to have just some scenarios where you play raids and invasions, I guess. It gives you some examples of that. We have the expedition to Cherbourg. You got your British and French briefings. How to set up the terrain. The win and lose conditions and how it played. Then you have 18th century war games. So this is just pictures, I guess, of models set up for the conflicts of the 18th century. Again, the 18th century covered a lot of different conflicts, some that involve all of Europe, some involving transatlantic, even 7 Years' War, for example. So it just kind of gives you an idea of what that looks like on the table. If you're interested in learning more about the conflicts of the 18th century, they do have a bibliography of further reading here. So you can definitely check those out. And then the credits. And we come to the end of the battle. So this book, the Last Argument of Kings, really is a lot different from the Napoleonic campaign books that I've covered on the channel. Gives you a different flavor of warfare on your tabletop, and it's a fantastic read. It covers War of Spanish Succession, the Great Northern War, the Austro-Turkish Wars, Austrian Succession, English Succession, 7 Years' War, War in the Colonies. Just a lot to cover. More so than Albion Triumphant and Albion Triumphant II, which really specifically covered one section of the Napoleonic Wars each. So hopefully, you don't see a lot of 18th century warfare, especially like on YouTube. You see mostly Napoleonic stuff, or even later with American Civil War. But if anything, after seeing this brief overview of the Last Arguments of Kings, if 18th century combat, 18th century warfare on the tabletop interests you, this is definitely the book to get. So, alright, if you like this video, go ahead and click like. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, I appreciate it if you would. Click the bell notification icon to get notified of all new read-through reviews coming out of the channel. And then click the link in the description below to join our Discord server. That's the best way I could personally interact with you and chit-chat you about Black Powder and any other game that I cover on the channel. That's it. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more read-through review for more Gaming Noob Historical.